Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Grandma Has ADHD. If you're watching, you're going to notice that today's guest, Kayva Jha, is not a grandma. I mean, I don't think she's a grandma. She looks like she's in her 20s, but she does work with seniors and she does have ADHD and she does have a family with ADHD. And we met in San Diego at one of the many, many events that I attend. And I thought that what she had to share was important to hear. So with that said, I am going to read you her bio. So Kayva Jha is a healthcare professional and patient advocate who's passionate about treating the whole patient, not just their symptoms. She currently works as strategic business development manager for a leading mobile wound care company in Arizona, where she's building ethical, patient-focused care for seniors with complex wounds. Her mission started at 17 during a high school internship in vascular surgery, where she noticed doctors were missing crucial pieces of the puzzle: how behavioral factors, nutrition, and mental health impact wound healing. Well, that's a good reason to have you on this podcast. Now she's developing research on the connection between psychology and physiology, and she founded a nonprofit called Someone Who Cares that helps uninsured patients navigate healthcare and access critical medical care. Kayva's big picture goal is inspiring medical professionals to see the full story of each patient, who they are, what shaped them, and what they need to truly heal. And I love that, Kayva. I don't know if you know this, but I had cancer 20 years ago when I was 34, and navigating that system in a space that I had no idea what I was doing. It was a very, very scary process. And I was just a number to that doctor, but it was my body. I had young children and it was really, really scary. And I also want to put in a plug that not just for people who are uninsured, but also anyone who struggles with ADHD may often struggle with the maze of the forms and the calls and then do this and then do this. I was joking with my mom yesterday. She also has ADHD, and I usually say that I won't cook anything that has more than 5 ingredients. My mom was telling me she just bought a book that was 4 ingredients or less. So I can't even imagine navigating the healthcare system with ADHD. So welcome to the podcast. Get us started.
Well, first off, I need that book because I am right in the same camp. I will definitely not cook anything with more than 5 ingredients, or that takes me more than 30 minutes. So that sounds awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Since the inception of Grandma Has ADHD, I have been dying to know more about this project and get onto this podcast and talk about my experience, even discovering that one of my grandparents very clearly had ADHD. And it really changed the course of my life, getting my diagnosis, and changed the course of how I looked at people and their experience and their struggle in navigating their health throughout their life.
I love that. Before we start on your work, I always like to hear people's ADHD stories. And since you are the grandchild, I think you might be the first grandchild. Is your grandparent still living?
Yes. So it was in August of 2023. I was visiting my grandparents with my sister and noticing the way that we all interacted. I noticed that my grandfather most definitely had markers of ADHD: high restlessness, high need to be constantly active, hyperactivity, and bouncing from one topic to the other. Also, repetition of phrases that he was not fully aware that he was repeating, which is our favorite. So it was in noticing that I realized the lineage and the connection.
So did you tell him?
So I think, if memory serves me right, I definitely brought it up to him that I think that he and I struggle with the same area there. And I know that my mom has also probably emphasized it to him as well. I don't know how much it registers, but it also makes him an amazing grandfather who he is over 80, but I mean, I can't even imagine him even acting like a day over 50 years old. He is way more capable and energetic than I have ever been. So I think it also makes him who he is, an
Oh,
amazing friend.
definitely. And I definitely can see hyperactivity. My father is hyperactive. My mom is inattentive. My dad's 80. And you
Mm,
can definitely see the gift of hyperactivity in your as you're aging. Not so much when you're that little boy that has to sit still in the classroom, but when you're an 80-year-old who can outpace people that are almost half your age, that's a gift. Um,
absolutely.
So tell me a little bit before we get started. First of all, you are quite impressive. And I want to highlight for everybody that I just read this long bio of all these things that Kayva has done. And yet she just said, if I have to cook something that's more than 30 minutes or four ingredients, I can't do it. So I think that really highlights what it's like to have an ADHD brain. We are interest driven. So if there is something that ignites us or that we're passionate about, it can be the hardest task in the world, and it is like no problem to get it done. But like, ask me to read an instruction manual or a recipe, it is not going to happen. So I like to highlight that when you really get to see it in real life. And I think that there's so many people, especially the audience that I am catering this podcast to, which is I've been beating myself up my entire life. I had no idea why I always felt different or why I felt like I was too much or why I couldn't get it together. To recognize you have your strengths, and it's just these new generations that are discovering ADHD and its impact get an opportunity to really like play to those strengths and then farm out the things that we're not good at. Right.
Absolutely. Really happy you pointed that out too, because I think something that happens so much with the ADHD mind is we can have bouts of feeling confident and accomplished in what we do. But something that I know just from my research in ADHD is we struggle with that object permanence. So to remember that this is who we are when we're also faced with simple, mundane tasks that seem so daunting, it's that constant cycle of am I enough going on in your brain? And I think it's really cool that you pointed that out. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Like one of the things that I learned in ADHD coaching was that a lot of people with ADHD actually have to go back to LinkedIn to see everything that they've done because we're sort of like out of sight, out of mind. I'm doing this, it's now or it's not now. And I think that there's also a lot of imposter syndrome with ADHD. So we feel like we have to accomplish to sort of prove ourselves. And so it's funny when I read a bio from guests, it's typically like on and on and on. And I'm like, do you realize how impressive this is? And yet, I am sure that there are things in your life that you are beating yourself up for, like, why can't I get it together?
Absolutely. And you asked me about my story with ADHD, which I think is a huge background that we have to go over to segue
Yes.
into what we'll talk about. And so it really started, I think my mental health journey really started by the time I was actually 9, 10. I noticed that I was different and the fact that I did not have the level of energy that most kids did, or like that patience for behaviors that kids normally engage in. Like, I did not ever want to go out to play recess. I was like, I'd much rather be inside and chill out here. And I noticed when I would go traveling on trips with my parents, I was looking for my next opportunity to sleep as a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that I kind of just went through life with. By the age of 12 or 13, I could tell that there was something where I needed to talk to myself every night and kind of review like what's been going on with me and what got me to this point where I just feel different and sad and like I don't belong. What happened? And I had this conversation with myself almost every night, like I was my own therapist. Fast forward to when I was 15, I had struggled my entire life with a pressure to keep up an image for appearance. I was born and blessed to have some nice genes, and that's something that gets noticed when you were young. And when you are young and all you hear about is how you should be a model and that, you're tall and you're skinny and this is exactly who you should be, that becomes your first validator and the first thing you identify with. So if I'm not pretty and if I'm not skinny, then I'm not me. And then what? So I remember even from the age of 3 looking at myself in the mirror and saying, if I don't stay underweight for my whole life, then I failed. Then like I can't not be underweight, right? By the time I was 15, I had never gotten to a point where I was overweight at all. In fact, I was a beautiful, curvy 15-year-old girl, and I just felt inadequate. I felt inadequate with my intelligence. I really wanted to be on honor roll, and I wasn't. That's something that I was as a kid. And then I also felt like I had outgrown that willowy, wispy body that I originally. And those two things made me feel very out of line with myself. I remember the night that I made an actual promise to myself that I will do anything it takes to lose 15 pounds and get to X number so that I am happy. Right. And I almost knew what I was doing. Like I almost knew that I was diving into something that was going to be a process, right? From that point, I became extremely obsessive about dieting, exercising, and getting everything perfect. And when I found out the whole calorie in, calorie out relationship, started losing weight really fast. I started getting compliments all the time. And the thing that I noticed the most though was all of a sudden everything was organized. Like I could get my schoolwork done on time. My time management was impeccable. I was not constantly getting the comment, you have so much potential. I still
Mhm.
can't stand the word potential because
Mm.
of how much we heard it growing up. And I remember I was at a point, that grading period, where I was so exhausted that I would have to have my dad pick me up in the middle of school. I would miss the classes that I was like, I'm good on these ones. And then come back later in the day for the classes that I knew I needed to be in class for and needed guidance on because I was just that exhausted. And I told myself, if this impacts my grades, I'm done. It's been great losing this weight and everything, but my grades are most important. And what ended up happening was I got my report card back and I was on honor roll. And now this established something for me that I could not kick for 6 years, that all of a sudden, everything that I failed at in life is now succeeding. And it's only succeeding because I've become a perfectionist with my body and my exercise routine and nutrition. And so as long as I have that, even though I know it's extremely unhealthy, I knew within 1 to 2 months that I was not in a good place. As long as I have this, I have success. And so this was what pushed me into that issue. By the time I was in college, I had developed very severe bulimia, and it had gotten to a point where I had been in group therapies. I had so much knowledge and self awareness around eating disorders and what was driving it. I just couldn't apply the solution. And when I was 19, I was looking into research papers about what medically can we do about these eating disorders because I used to pray every night. If there was a pill I could take to just take this all away, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I remember coming across one research paper out of hundreds where at the bottom it said the combination of an antidepressant, anti-anxiety, or psychotic with the combination of a stimulant and a mood stabilizer has been shown to be very successful in treating individuals with binge eating and bulimia. I then at the same time came across a DNP psychiatrist who within 5 minutes of talking to me was like, okay, hold up 1 second. So you've been a psychiatrist for 6 years, but no one's ever told you that you have ADHD. And I was, "What? Me? I have ADHD? No, I'm such a focused student and I'm always behaving and perfect about my behavior." And he was like, "No, no, no. This is clear cut ADHD having developed into an eating disorder. And the very first thing we need to do if you don't want to get checked into a hospital by the time we're at next week is we need to get you on a medication plan." And then in that appointment, in the next 10 minutes, I had my prescriptions for my stimulant and my antidepressant, anti-anxiety, mood stabilizer, sorry. And within the next 5 minutes, I had my first normal meal in 6 years.
Wow. Well, I have to say, we hear that perfectionism can be a trait of ADHD, and it's so opposite of when we think of ADHD because we think of the clutter. But I have heard that it is a way of masking. And so I'm so sorry that you had that journey, but I'm so appreciative that you're sharing that. I know that wasn't what we were supposed to talk about, but we're still going to get there. But I would love to hear a little bit more from you about perfectionism because, as I've said, it's not my ADHD experience, but I know that it is. There was a podcast that I actually listened to when my youngest child was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 16. And here I am studying to be an ADHD coach, and I had missed it. And so it turns out that this podcast was the 8 different types of ADHD in girls, and one of them is the perfectionist. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey, but we're going to take a pause because I like to put in a word from our sponsors and take a water break and check in with our guests. So just please hang on to hear more of Kayva Jha's story.
Are you tired of feeling like you can't get it together? Struggling with clutter that overwhelms you despite your best efforts? Wondering why organization feels impossible while others make it look so easy? You're not alone, and it's not your fault. Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro, host of the Grandma Has ADHD podcast, and I understand exactly what you're going through. I combine my years of hands-on work as founder of Silver Linings Transitions, a move management and home organizing company, together with ADHD coach training, and help adults 50 and over connect the dots between ADHD and lifelong struggles. Whether you're downsizing, decluttering, or simply trying to create systems that work for your ADHD brain, I provide virtual and in-person coaching for those in the San Diego area. Together, we'll develop practical strategies that honor how your brain actually works, not how you think it should work. Ready to trade shame for understanding? Visit grandmahasadhd.com or call to schedule a discovery session at 760-607-7377 because it's never too late to finally make sense of your story. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com.
We are back with Kayva Jha, and we are exploring a topic that I have not yet explored in the Grandma Has ADHD arena. And I am so grateful that Kayva brought it to light for us so we could sort of hear about it. Before I continue with the interview, if you are enjoying this interview and you are getting content, or you're relating to the content, or you think somebody else will, I would love it if you would like the podcast and share it. So that is how we are growing. And that growth means that we can finally destigmatize ADHD and really all of the mental, I don't like the word disorder, but neurodivergent thinking, because we are not all made to think the same way. So please share the podcast, like it, subscribe to it, and then of course join us at the Grandma Has ADHD community. Okay, so enough plugs. All right, Kayva, again, I'm so grateful to you. So take me through what you've learned about perfectionism and ADHD.
Absolutely. It was recently that I came across a video. It was last year in the summer. And I highly recommend this YouTuber. His name is Dr. Alok K. He calls himself Dr. K. And he essentially made a video about female ADHD. And when I watched this video, I literally felt like somebody had just read me my horoscope or my life story. And I was in tears. He quite literally walked me through every single thing that I went through and that so many girls go through with ADHD growing up. And so it's marked by that pressure for perfectionism by the age of 11, 12, developing body image issues and also developing insecurities around capabilities, like intellectually and socially. And he talked about a very common development of eating disorders by the time you're hitting your teenage years. And then by the time you're getting into college, you are developing substance use issues to cope with this eating disorder and cope with the rest of life happening as an adult. And he goes into the saddest part of the video where he talks about how females with ADHD, I believe, are 6 times, and I might be completely butchering the statistics, so I would just double check, but are 6 times more likely to end up in an abusive relationship. And that part is heartbreaking. So we see this pattern, and it brought me right back to when my high school teachers first started telling me, because they were noticing a difference in my personality, and they always said, the light in your eye has gone somewhere. What happened? And they started telling me, you do come from a very high pressure family, perfectionist mother, all of these things. And I was like, what do you mean? I was a rare kind of Indian girl growing up in America. I had a feminist dad and mom who taught us career and financial independence over any man or anything in life. I had parents who told me, we want you to be happy. I didn't just want to become a doctor because I was Indian. I wanted to be in medicine because it was the only thing I really was passionate about. And their entire philosophy with me was being open, having a voice, and chasing happiness over any sort of success or perfection. So I didn't understand what she meant. I was like, I don't know what you mean. But now that I can see the lineage through my family and that strain of perfectionism kind of comes in with ADHD to overcompensate the incapabilities we feel we have, I understand that they were actually not incorrect. And I do have to mention, a huge part of my journey and really finding myself and finding my value was also because of these teachers. I want to shout out to Jonathan Torres and Adrian Fluitt. Torres, throughout chemistry and throughout my high school experience, he would literally make me snap a rubber band or take it back whenever I'd say, oh, I'm stupid. And I would just rattle this off like every 2 minutes within my speech. And he would remind me, you are not stupid. You are extremely intelligent. You are not stupid. And he did not care how many times he had to say it to hammer it into my head. So I do now believe that my mind just works differently, but I do feel that I am a brilliant person intellectually too.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. So I always ask my guests, this is a tough one to ask given your journey, but I say if you could press a button and your ADHD would disappear your whole life, you would never have had it. I want honest, and there is no maybe sometime, no, it's a yes or no. I would do it all over, have my ADHD, or no, thank you, I'm a hard pass.
I love this question. I recently saw a Trevor Noah interview where he was asked this question too. It was an interesting answer, but for my answer, it's a solid, I would choose this life. I would choose this life. I would still choose the eating disorder that happened. I would choose this exact journey. I don't think who I am without it.
I mean, I just got chills and I love it. And I think one of the things that I love about ADHD is how resilient we are and also our sense of justice. And I think that when you have something that happens to you, you want to help others through that experience. And your story is going to resonate with a grandma who is listening to this and is thinking of a grandchild and is like, oh, I didn't recognize the ADHD. And then when we get our brains right, life changes. I want to go back to something that you said about the 6 times more likely to be in an abusive. One of the things that I learned is that negative self-talk, that voice in our heads is very, very common. And I don't know if it's the negative messaging we got growing up. I know for me, I got a lot of it. Like I was a mess. I was always talking in class and disruptive. And so how much of it were I'm just mimicking the negative messages that I was getting versus, and I don't know the answer to this, are we just naturally inclined to be negative? I know that we catastrophize and the anxiety comes from all of the things that we think because our brains are just going and running scenarios. But what I have learned as a result of this podcast is how many women ended up young, pregnant women marrying the wrong person. So I don't think you're wrong. I don't know that the number 6 times is right. I will look it up and put it in the show notes. I'm also going to put into the show notes. I want to understand Dr. K. So I will get that from you. So if you are listening to the podcast, we will put it in the show notes and you'll be able to look that up. I want to make sure that we cover what you do with wound care and how that will relate to our audience.
100%. And so which one's your first question? Sorry, I got a little lost track there.
You can totally ADHD all over me. I wanted to know about wound care and how it relates to the audience because you mentioned specifically the impact that mental health has on wound care. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So to begin with, my entire reason for getting into medicine was I love patients. I love people. And I love getting to know them. I would not be happy in a medical career where I do not get to see patients every day, understand their story, and get to know them. When I was entering the field, as we call it, in wound care, that means you are going to hospitals, clinics, you are seeing patients, you are in the field, right? You're not like an outside kind of manager or something. When I started getting into the field and meeting patients, I came across so many amazing, diverse individuals who had lovely personalities and were extremely entertaining and very hard for me to rip myself away from once I was in conversation with them. And that's when I would notice that, oh, a lot of these patients are presenting with ADHD-like symptoms or depressive-like symptoms or OCD or PTSD. And those are the most common comorbidities I even see part of the intake team at my clinic that we are seeing in our patient charts. There is a comorbidity of major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety, OCD, PTSD. That's why we have a huge veteran population with wound issues. A lot of times they do have PTSD associated within their comorbidities. And then I started making a link between, the fact that these behavioral conditions can lead individuals to patterns of behavior that are linked to substance use, self-harm, and self-destruction. I noticed my own pattern with being a self-sabotager, and that I noticed that I had that kind of issue where I would go to extremes of things. I was either perfect or I was not. You're going out for like an all-nighter or I was not. So this is where I started seeing that did these patterns really start because of a mood disorder or dysregulation in their childhood? And the biggest link I made was with my binge eating disorder development, because what I found out about a lot of eating disorders is that we typically associate the image of an eating disorder with somebody who is malnourished. But what you will actually end up finding is that a majority may be at a completely normal weight or overweight. And this is because eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes too. It's not just anorexia and starvation. It can absolutely be anorexic bulimia, where you are anorexic, you're starving, then you're binging, then you're purging, or whatever combination it might be. And even for myself, going through an eating disorder, I think I'm presented as a normally healthy looking individual. And so it was also hard to equate that, oh, this person is going through something. And what I would notice now is, okay, so the biggest issue that we see with wound development is a lifestyle characterized by poor nutrition choices, poor physical activity, just overall in general, poor lifestyle choices, which can also be characterized by substance use and self-destructive behavior.
Which also, by the way, correlate with a lot of people with ADHD. So
Huge. Yeah. And that was a relationship I discovered in college and did a lot of research on. because I was just curious about why are certain people drawn to these behaviors. But that was the first thing I noticed. Okay, so I had a patient that I could tell, and this is what I see with a lot of my women patients. They starve themselves a lot. They don't eat all really. And then they will get hungry. So they will eat something that is easy and accessible. You don't have to cook. You don't have to think about it. If it's like one of those packets, like a ho-ho or like a quick microwave dinner, that's the way we're going to go, and that's how we're going to get our nutrition. And so this is when we see a huge disparity of health and a decline, leading into issues such as diabetes, atherosclerosis, vascular medical conditions, peripheral arterial disease. I can go on. But what we're seeing there is it starts with that nutrition factor. And one thing that I also learned recently was nutrition is highly linked to ADHD improvement. So the more whole and clean foods you do eat, the cleaner your brain kind of works. And I saw this happen with me with my eating disorder. That is why I felt so laser focused and so disciplined and on target when I was actively obsessing over every ingredient in my food and getting my workout in.
Benji says stop. Wait. I had to pause. Okay. I can't control when he barks. Oh, I thought I paused, but now you guys are getting to hear what my real life is with Benji the dog. But I know you're not going to hear the podcast. So Benji was absolutely in agreement. And instead of saying squirrel, I have to say dog, the term squirrel, right? When we get distracted. So I am going to apologize that I probably missed the last minute. So if you want to go back and if you remember.
That's the next part. I was like, I actually don't even know. But
you were talking about nutrition and you said that you saw the impact when you were managing your nutrition and your exercise. That was sort of when I lost you.
Yes, exactly. So I saw this relationship, and I want to quickly go back into a personal experience as well, where when it came to kicking the eating disorder, it was my first addiction, and it was my safety blanket, and I had to genuinely choose to get better from it and to leave it behind, because my biggest fear was I was going to lose the actual perfection, the actual ability to do amazing things and be so disciplined and hit every target. I knew that it meant that I was going to reintroduce chaos into my life. But what ended up happening was, because of the medications I was on, the chemistry of my brain literally changed. And so therefore I was not able to partake in those behaviors anymore. And that's a really big part of this journey, and something I want to touch on this podcast when we're talking about overall population health, is that when we're going through a mental health issue, I don't think a lot of us are recognizing that this may be controversial, but that sometimes therapy is not the only thing that's going to fix it.
I'm going to pause. I totally agree with you 100%, but I have to be super sensitive to my audience, because when you are aging, you're probably dealing with other occurring conditions that are going to take priority over your mental health, which is unfortunate, but that's the reality. And so I've been very clear when I do a podcast that I recognize that medication cannot be for everyone. And so I steer away from it just because I'm trying to really appeal to my general audience. And having said that, I think anybody can benefit from putting tools in place and scaffolding and understanding your brain better than if medication is not on the table for you. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
No, absolutely. And again, this is a huge part of what we're talking about when we're talking about mental health within physiology, is that every patient is so diverse. So what may have worked for me may not work for somebody else. And that is the biggest part. I even remember writing in my medical school application that I want us as doctors to start believing that not every patient is a formula. We have to derive a new equation every time we meet a new person. It's not one size fits all. And so going back to the fact that when we're treating the whole patient for wound care, we do need to be addressing the fact that there are mental health issues that can be keeping them from compliant behaviors. And what we classify as compliance in the health field is actively taking the steps and the measures to not only bolster your care, but to make sure that it actually, the treatment and the journey works, right? Because, for example, a lot of patients don't know that smoking while you're getting wound care is basically canceling out every single thing that we are doing when we're providing wound care, cutting off oxygen and access to those arteries. And that is why that wound has developed. It did not have enough oxygen to support a healthy skin system around it. And that's why your skin integrity has decreased. So,
And the compliance also, because I noticed that even with myself, I remember going to an integrative doctor, a holistic doctor, and they gave me like all of these pills to take at different times of the day. Again, before I understood the impact of ADHD, and I could not do it. I could not. So now I'm very clear. Like, if you give me too many things, it's not going to happen. I have to set an alarm to remember to take my Synthroid every morning. I'm 55. I can't imagine as I age if I am not putting those tools into place to be compliant. And that's not even mentioning poor habits like smoking and that kind of thing.
100%. And like you said, I mean, I had this eating disorder, this obsession. I used to cook so much because of how obsessed my mind was with food. And I am still struggling. I cannot find out how to build that routine, how to build that consistent. I am going to exercise, not because I want to look a certain way, but because I want to feel good in my body. And now that I'm in a field where I see exactly how much the lifestyle choices we make, even at this age, impact our future health and where we're going to end up as seniors, I still struggle so much to eat 3 square meals a day, not skip all my meals, and then eat a humongous dinner of God knows what. So we can all still be there and be struggling to be compliant. And I genuinely think that it's the depression and the ADHD that might be underlying for patients that is keeping us from that ability to maintain the compliant routine and actually get better. So, I mean, I'll take a pause there. What I will go into next is more about the research I'm trying to get into. But before I do that, just wanted to see if you had any questions or anything.
No, it just makes so much sense to why you would have wanted to be on this podcast because, I mean, they really go so hand in hand. You're going to have more issues with your health and problems that need to be addressed if you're also having, for whatever reason, the compliance issue. And so, again, I'm really glad we're bringing this information to the audience. Okay, so the research, and I want to be mindful of the time just because one of the things that I notice with ADHD is that I'm going to lose interest in something past a certain point. So let's ADHD it down and give everybody what they need to take away.
Absolutely. One thing I will touch on right before getting into your research is the social impact of wounds and what we see with these patients. The number one thing I would also notice is that these patients lacked a support system, a genuinely consistent support system of either family or friends. And as we probably know, these mental health issues can lead to relationship issues where maintaining consistent relationships is something that might come naturally to people. I tend to notice that these patients are quite often alone, and that might be something that further triggers the inability to be compliant, as you don't have people who love you or a support system reminding you and nagging you to take care of yourself. I know for me, if I didn't have my mom to call me 3 times a day to make that dang doctor's appointment, I would not make it. And that's why I do what I do with the patients that I'm with. And I remind them as many times as I need to, because I know that when it comes to who we are ourselves, even if we don't have ADHD, it's much harder to take the steps to take care of yourself rather than to take the steps to take care of somebody else. So,
Well, and that highlights social connection and how important that is to our health as well, whether we have ADHD or not. When we don't have that connection, then that's where we get depressed. And it's also, again, chicken or the egg. So,
exactly.
yeah.
So you said chicken or the egg, because that was my next part about the research. This is how I got in.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct. One thing that I always say when we're talking about wounds is it is a biopsychosocial condition. It's biological, it's psychological, and it's social in the fact that whether or not you have the behavioral health condition before the wound or maybe after that, or let me rephrase this. It may turn out that the patient gets the wound and then develops a behavioral health issue or a mood disorder because of the conditions they are in. So when you have a wound, you have decreased mobility. When the wounds are getting infected and they're kind of stuck in that phase of we're healing, we're getting infected, we're healing, we're getting infected, they can start to smell, and this can be embarrassing for people. This is why they don't go and show the wound to a doctor, because they're too embarrassed to even step out of the house with it. And then lastly, as behavioral health can also relate to dementia or disorders where we're losing memory, which has now been shown to have an actual relationship with neuropathy, meaning that if you have neuropathy, you might not feel pain or some sort of pressure that has occurred on a certain part of your skin. This can happen in the legs and the extremities. And so then we see patients who will develop a wound and not even know it's there because they're not hurting. This is huge in dementia patients. So going now into the research, it turns out that the surgeon that I worked with the most closely when I was in high school actually had an interest in understanding the relationship between cognitive diseases such as Alzheimer's and vascular health. And what my idea was bringing to him that a little more different from where you're kind of coming from, but I am curious about what's the chicken or the egg. Is it the behavioral health issues that lead patients to have certain behaviors and patterns, habits that then lead them to poor health outcomes that can develop chronic wound issues? Or is it that the patient has gotten a wound and has now developed depression because they're isolated a lot, or anxiety because they're embarrassed about the condition they have? Which one comes first? And what do we do? So that's where the research is kind of going. And I'll take a pause there.
Yeah, I think we're going to have you come back and really just dive into that. So I would just say that I want to schedule another appointment. If you are listening to this podcast, we are going to have Kayva back. We do not want to leave you with a cliffhanger, but we're going to leave you with a cliffhanger. This was such an amazing conversation. And thank you all for listening. Thank you, Kayva, for being so vulnerable and sharing your story with our audience. And you will definitely be invited back so that we can get more into the research behind the wounds and the chicken and the egg and all of that. So thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Kayva, any final words? I promise I'm making a commitment in front of everybody that you will be invited back.
Absolutely. The last thing I just want people to know, whoever might be listening, is despite where you are in your relationships with your family, despite who you have in your life, or if you're alone and what you've done, whatever your past is, you are a person. I want you to take the focus off of whether you're good or you're bad. You're a person. You're doing your best every day, and you deserve to get better. You deserve to be healthy, whether that's on your own or with your family. You deserve it. Don't give up on yourself.
Wow. What a great message. Okay. One more thing that I just realized is that if anybody wants to reach out to you, how do they find you?
Absolutely. Well, that's a great question. Honestly, you are welcome to email me at any point. I will share it right now. It is just my first name, last name, that Kayva Jha. So Kayv as in Victor, Jha at iCloud.com. And Jami, I'm sure you can include this in your link or in your notes. So please feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to share more contact pathways with you so that we can get in touch and talk.
I love it. And I love your message. Don't give up on yourself. You matter. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Grandma Has ADHD.
The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.